Great. Well, thank you, everyone. How many of you were already here for Enric, Andrew, and Daniel's talk earlier?
I'm here.
Oh, okay, so quite a few. Well, we'll hope to make this a continuation of that and going a little bit deeper. I took a little bit of notes, jot down a few notes while they were talking earlier. So we have a good panel of, I think, representation from different sides, with Enric and Daniel more on the agency services side, Andrew, Billy, more around the game developer and publishing side. And with with UA advertising, that's certainly an important part for any game business, right? And even within our own App Annie data, we see that UA contributes a big part to mobile app downloads. What we see is 4 out of 10 downloads are coming from UA efforts, and this is even bigger when it comes to gaming. Right, so let's start off with just maybe a quick introduction from each of you. What's your role and what's your company's role, especially as it relates to our topic of discussion around UA? Maybe start with Billy.
I'm Billy from Sixwave. So basically, I'm leading the publishing team in Sixwave. And then, so for Sixwave, we focusing on game publishing. Currently, mainly focused in Japan and then all around the world as well, mainly in Hong Kong, Taiwan as well. And then talking about marketing, I think I also in charge of the marketing in anywhere. So from online to offline as well. So currently we spend a lot in Japan, so we do have a lot of intelligence in Japan.
I have the mic. I'm Andrew from Sixwave a couple years ago. And I'm from Huuuge. I'm the general manager from Huuuge and leading the Asia Pacific business operations and marketing. So as I see in the presentation, we are the mobile game developers and mainly focus on the social casino, but right now we are actually expanding our portfolio to the casual and even like the publishing business. Yep.
Hi, my name is Daniel. I'm the founder and CEO of GoGoChart. We specialize in mobile apps marketing. Initially, for the first year or so, pretty much all of them of our clients are gaming customers in mobile games. But in now 2019, we have 50% non-gaming customers. Be it brands, fashion, e-commerce, crypto, finance, lending, all kinds, even dating apps and banking apps. So we help them to not only just acquire UA, we also help them to improve their ASO. So in other words, improving their conversion, potentially, yeah.
Hi, my name is Enric. I'm CMO at LabCave Games. We develop games, but as Ina said, we help as well other developers with their app store optimization, and I oversee our games ASO, publishing, as well as relationships with third parties.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm going to start off with some questions, but I certainly want this to be interactive and for the audience to get your values worth and present some of your questions as well. So I'll just frame it, start off with kind of some of from a high level strategy planning, KPIs, how do you even set those, and then some of the, maybe going a little bit more deeper into what Andrew had already covered into the specific tactics. But before we start off, let's get some maybe definition out of the way, since we heard a little bit earlier with Enric talking about ASO, and then we had some conversations around UA. How do you guys define or differentiate between UA and ASO, and how do you see those two interplay and relate to each other? Maybe I'll start with Enric.
That goes to me first. ASO, it's working on, or purely on how many more organic installs I get at the end of the month, as far as we understand at LabCave. UA is paid user acquisition, I'm paying to acquire more users. How this correlates to the other one, actually in my presentation, I showcased that it really depends on the app or the game that you're working on. Is there an impact between paid or UA and ASO or organic? Definitely, but but you gotta do your own research and work it out. How much does it have an impact, as well as based on where you're running and what you're doing. It's not the same a campaign on Facebook versus a campaign with an influencer.
Yep.
Andrew?
I think that we have like a couple like directions to elaborate the strategy. So it really depends on the game. So it's Huuuge. We like launched the game in 2015 as the Huuuge Casino. So we are latecomer. So that's why we actually need to put a lot of effort on the user acquisition, because like we are like far below like the top 10. But in the like past 3 to 4 years, we catch up like to the top 10. So like the user acquisition is actually like the main things for us. And then like for ASO, I think like we're still learning. So because like the thing change every day. So Google's algorithm and like the Apple iOS like front end, and then those are algorithm change. We cannot stop. Right, so I think like the strategy between like ASO and UA is actually we have to keep learning, and then to try and error, and then run over testing to make sure that we are not far behind from the market.
Anything else to add from?
Right. I also agree that so because for UA and ASO as well, both keep changing. So we actually need to learn a lot throughout the operation, and also we also have to judge whether the game is really can drive a lot of organics, and then to put how many resources on ASO. So for some core game that might not be really can generate a lot of organics, then we would rather focus more on user acquisition.
Great, thank you. Let's start just overall on a app marketing strategic planning perspective. Let's say you're just launching, about to launch a new product or game. How do you even think about planning what that strategy would be? How do you assess the market? And are there any tools that you would recommend to someone that is trying to plan this out and build this out?
You want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. We do publish game in Japan. So indeed, we do have a Japanese local office. So they have the local intelligence to help us to judge which type of games is good for Japan market. So in the case when we got a really good game for the Japanese market, then how do we evaluate the marketing strategy? Is like we have to talk with the local partner. Yeah, because indeed we do think that local partner is very important, because when we talk about launching a new game in a new region, so we have to make sure that the game is localized, and then also the marketing strategy as well. So we have the localized ad copy, screenshot, ISO as well, and also all of the UA channel. So each region should have some really specific local UA channels. So we need to work with them directly to make sure that we have the local intelligence to help us to grow the game.
And how do you get that local intelligence for someone? I mean, like, is there some? Do you just have to find people on the ground? Like, what would be the best way that you could advise someone that is maybe trying to go into a different market or territory they're not familiar with?
So for Japan, you can talk with us, and then for other region, I would say so. App Annie is actually a really good tool for us to look at which game are using which channel to do the marketing from the beginning and then to middle of the operation. So doing some market research and going to the conference to meet up with different people. So this is a good way to explore.
Yeah. I can talk about like the like launching a new game. So frankly speaking, like in Huuuge, we do not launch a lot of new games. So like the first one is actually in 2015. It's like the Huuuge Casino, and then next year is like Billionaire Casino, and recently we're just launching a new one. It's like Traffic Puzzle. So, but what we learned is between like these 3 to 4 years, like there's some principles that are not changing. It's actually you need a lot of capital to grow the game nowadays. So like money is like the main driver, the main decision makers, like whether your game is like getting like hit or not. But like back to like some of the principles is actually like you have like to be a little bit conservative in the beginning to make sure like the retention, the monetization is good enough to sustain the growth. So imagine that if your retention is really bad and then your monetization is actually cannot sustain like those of the CPI. So literally you do not like go to the step 2 by scale it because like you probably like your game will be shutting down after like the first 2 months. So like by using a lot of the tool is actually right now we use a lot of internal tool because like we can scale it. We have like internal BI system to look into like each of the cohort, each of the users' behavior. Then we can model their like, for example, like the slot machine games. We can see like how many people they make the 100 spins, like 500 spins and 1,000 spins, and then what is corresponding behavior and then purchasing behavior as well. So we can segment the users. They are the potential whales or they won't be spending money at all. So that actually can help us to like do different kind of a modeling. And then for the third party like tools, I think App Annie that we talk about is actually looking into the competitors and then how we can tackle those of like the marketing message by we are doing better than that, we are doing better on that, we try to avoid it, maybe we don't have that kind of features. So that can actually help us to understand like those of the things. And then for ASO, we also have some other tool as well. So I think right now we actually make sure that each of like the category or like each kind of like the expertise, we have a different tool to be used nowadays.
Okay, what about from the agency perspective with Enric and Daniel, as you're working with clients, how do you help them to plan out their campaigns?
So we mentioned UA and ASO. ASO has been a really hot keyword for the past couple of years. Many didn't really realize the importance of it until in the past 2-3 years. So if you're judging by UA perspective, UA is all performance driven. It's all tracking. If you can't track, you can't measure the performance. So tracking is hugely important. But then ASO is very hard to track completely. For example, A/B testing, the icon screenshot, the descriptions, you can't really represent the entire audience if you're saying that this screenshot is better than the other. The only way you can do it is by making really minor different changes, like spot the difference pretty much, actually. I always say to our clients, it's like spot the difference. There's only 1 or 2 differences in the 2 images, and then you can really test the actual result. That's one way to potentially judge. And we actually learned that from our partners, one being Apple, actually. So I'd like to also mention some of the tools that we use. So we've, obviously we work with all the MMPs, so AppsFlyer, Adjust, but also we've developed our own internal tool and also our own CMP, campaign management platform. So to give you an example, we work very closely and we do a lot of keyword optimization. So when you bid, what sorts of keywords, what the arrangement, how do you identify such a keyword? There's a set process that we use, and I'll give you some example. So if you use some tools online, maybe if you get directly from Apple, you probably get 1 or 2 keywords that they suggest to you. You may be able to acquire 50 to 100 more. But for some of our best clients, they have, for some of the products that we've been working for over a couple of months to 2-3 years, pretty much all of them have over 10,000 keywords in a data pool. We're not saying that we'll bid for all 10,000 keywords, but it's through that exercise we will identify the top keywords. And some, like Andrew was saying, the market changes very quickly, so you have to forever exploring new potential keywords, maybe even go back to the keywords that didn't work a year ago. So that is done by sets of process and measurement, I suppose, and to identify the real gem. Sometimes you unlock great keywords. I'll give you another example. I think this is really cool. Did you know, so the New York, the Financial Times, that's right, in the US, they actually unlocked a really special keyword, the Financial Times in Chinese. Oh. That actually, in simplified Chinese, that actually gave them the cheapest CPI and high ROI. Didn't know that until you've tested, explored, and it's a different language, targeting different sets of audience. So again, it's quite a creative way, and there's a lot to test. You can be quite creative as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Enric?
In terms of tools, App Annie, Sensor Tower, ASO-wise, there are a lot of tools available, App Follow, App Tweak, Mobile Action. I know, there are as you probably guys know, there are many tools available in the market. It's not which ones you use, it's how you use them. Unfortunately, I think you guys are going to share a similar opinion, is that sometimes we draw in data. It's not more about how much data do I have, it's how do I use the data that I do have, and which one do I make the most out of it, because I could just keep praising and telling you guys about many tools available in the market, but it's more about what you cherry pick as being the right information for you to feed you and your team and actually draw conclusions with that. Similar to the example you were giving about the financial terms, working out on these specific keywords. There are many tools in the market that can tell you which keywords you should be ranking for, what your competitors are doing, but unless you do your homework and work on these, it doesn't really matter what you're using if you don't use the right data in the first place.
Great. Now with, let's say, a strategy in place, you want to be able to measure and track the success of that. Now, Andrew, you mentioned earlier some of the metrics, or what you would look at is not so much on the installs, but one of them might be the targeted return on ad spend.
Right.
How do you even benchmark? Like, what is the right number that I should say, okay, this is the right goal. This is, I'm successful. I mean, like that metrics in itself is a number. How do you determine, like, how do you go about thinking about, what's the right benchmark metrics to use?
I see. So that actually is like a couple of directions that we can determine it or define the metrics. So A is actually from top management. How do we want to get the money back, right? So I want to pay back in 9 months and then 12 months or 24 months. You have a definitely different return on investment curve. But I think that we have to be realistic as well. So for social casino games particularly, so it's kind of an evergreen game. So the user will keep playing for 1 year, 2 years, and some of the users playing for our games for 5 years right now. So that actually is we can afford a higher CPI and a lower growth of the return on investment. But you can imagine that some of the hardcore games that we used to have the publishing in 6 Wave is actually the life cycle is only from 6 months to 12 months only, right? The users will gone away. So that will be have a different strategy in optimizing the campaign. So that actually is one thing is from the internal P&L objectives, and another one is actually from a lot of agency or our account managers from Facebook and Google. They will have those of a benchmarking studies to share with us. So looking in the slot only or the puzzle games only, they will kind of the range of the CPI, and then what is the range of day 7 and day 30 ROI. So if you're above the average, that means that your game is doing great. But if you're some of the metrics the conversion rate is not that good, then we have to try to adjust that. So that is only so I think the return on ad spend is only one consolidated metrics that we can observe and then to tell in the public. But when we optimize or operating our campaign, we actually looking at more than 10 different dimensions. So to answer your question is actually A is from your boss, from your top management to define that. It's make sure we are comfortable with cash flow. Second thing is actually learn from the market, and then you try to be better and better, and then compete with your competitors. Yeah.
Right, and then also depending on your type of game, the life cycle, as you mentioned, right? Whether it's an evergreen or a short term,
right?
Where you need to get that ad spend back quickly.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anything else to add?
Well, it's actually indeed a battle between the CPI and also the LTV. So you have to test out your game, which CPI will be in the market. Of course, different creative, different ASO, how to optimize the screenshot, the conversion rate will make some differences in terms of the CPI. And then when we have the CPI data, then you have to look into your retention and monetization data to measure your LTV. So you should have something in mind that how long will your game, the player will stay in the game. So imagine slot that may be 2 years, 3 year cycle. So if you are casual game, that might be shorter. Hardcore game, then you can imagine that some of the long player will leave the game earlier, but then the player might stay longer. So when you look into the LTV as well, you have to look into the LTV of the player, into different cohort, whales, long players, something like that. So cohort analysis is really important as well.
Talk a little bit more about the cohort analysis, because I think that's one of the key area of how do you actually determine the success and value of the users that you bring in. What do you mean by the cohort analysis? How do you do that?
So for 6-Wave, the simplest way of cohort analysis is like divided by different install date, and then of course you can divide it by different targeting, different region, and then look into the CPI of those particular targeting against the revenue generated from that. So with different targeting, different install date, and then or different region, then you know that the CPI, and also that means you can measure whether your game is really good in different region, and then if you are seeing that your LTV of particular regions is really on par with the CPI, then you can invest more.
Okay. Now, and you mentioned, probably learning from agencies. From the agency side, do you have any good benchmarks to share that people should kind of measure themselves against?
A couple of things actually. So before data, actually, when we get the data from the client side, when they share access to us, whether to their Google ads or their Apple search ads or even other channels, and also the mobile measuring partners, for example, AppsFly, Adjust, we will compile the data, we'll look at the data, and actually what usually, this is why we've developed our own internal tool, is because to merge the data into one meaningful data actually takes a lot of time when you have multiple channels. And a lot of the times, the data that you get have a discrepancy. So, for example, AppsFly will have a discrepancy if you compare it with your reports that you get from Apple, and also there's LAT, the limited ad tracking, which decreases by another 30% or more maybe. So then you have two different sets of data, but then which one's right? Apple will claim they're right, obviously, and then AppsFly will say they're real time. So it really depends on what you do with the data, and that's actually, we spent a lot of time initially, 2 years ago actually, working on all sets of data. And then we and then we developed our own internal tool, which saved us a lot of time. Some actually clients actually subscribe to that as well. So, and in terms of benchmark and useful tips that we share to our customers, most of the time actually, when we work with a product or a client, we try to learn a lot more than just their initial KPIs. We need to know the stage of their products. For example, if they're just launching a new product, their KPIs would be a lot different to a product that's been launched in the market for 3 to 5 years. Very different. Initially, they would look for growth. And also, if they've been just raised a huge round of fundraising, you know what's going to happen. They need growth, right? So it really depends on the actual DNA of the customer and also their target audience. I'm saying this from an agency point of view. It's not just the publishing. We have to work with customers from different verticals, different industries, different products actually. Some are non-gaming customers, some are localized in a different language. A Chinese user will be very different to potentially US, Japan, and Taiwan. We will share data the insight that we've gained from past experience. On top of that, we will share data that we've accumulated for the past usually 12 months in terms of, for example, useful keywords. The keywords that we've tried and we know fit this type of product. For example, casino products, we're very good at it. We know exactly the keywords that will convert, for English-speaking ones especially. So we'll be able to share those to similar clients without divulging sensitive information, I guess. Yeah.
All right, good. Well, we certainly heard a lot about Google and Facebook being, the go-to source when it comes to user acquisition. Besides those two, are there something else that you would recommend people should look into? I mean, certainly in terms of advertising platform to choose out there, there's more and more coming up these days. From our data, we're also seeing that, probably on Google Play, 45%, game publishers are, spending 45% more on different ad platforms. So, are there something that you would suggest to people, okay, you might also try looking at or testing out in these other tactics as well, besides from the Google or Facebook?
It's advertising time, right? So I think for Huuuge, Even like I think like last year or like 18 months ago, we have a record. It's like the finance tell us like, hey Andrew, we have like to pay 150 bills to different ad network. 150. So it means like other than Google and Facebook, we are using 148 different ad network. So that actually is not healthy, honestly. So because like we actually spending a lot of like 5,000 testing budget or 10,000 test budget, but it hasn't turned out like good results. So later on, because like we are actually getting more mature, and then we have a certain bargaining power in the market, so we trim down to only like 50 to 60 nowadays. So what are those of the rest of like the 60, 50? So I think like that we can categorize into like 2 to 3 categories. So other than Facebook and Google, so there's actually something similar like the Apple search ads and Twitter and then Snapchat, those are the social network inventory. And the second part is actually the video ad network, or like those of the DSP as well. So this kind of inventory is actually not guarantee that you have a high ROI or high ROAS, or even some of them they have a fraud issue. So, but we anyway have to try it. Give an example like for Apple search ads. So, if you're measuring like the return on investment curve, they are not growing as healthy as like Facebook and Google. But one of the key things is actually itself the Google's the Apple's users, they have a higher ARPU. So for certain extent, it's actually like when we have a $100 budget, we probably like spend like $10 to $15 on those of testing like the high risk channels. That means like we can bring in a good quality of the users, but they may not recoup 100% in a certain period of the time. So yeah, so if you are looking into like those other things, yes, we have like other than Facebook and Google, we have Apple, Vungo, Echo only, and then like Unity ads, those are the video ad network, and LiveOff and Arki, those are the DSP right now. We actually use them a lot. And particularly, I think like Billy can tell more about the Japan market. They have other ad network they have. Yeah.
Other markets, so other than Google Play and Apple stores, we can put APK in different markets, right? So what about that part?
Oh, so we don't do that, honestly. We only like count 100% on Google right now. Yeah.
We tried to, and the return of investment was atrocious. It just doesn't, I mean, from our games, we got in contact with a few networks that have third-party stores. Yeah. So far, even the Amazon app or the Windows that is, obviously gone. The return of investment is non-existent. So
there are several third-party apps.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, absolutely.
Somewhat user acquisition. You can do some more user acquisition with third-party markets, right? Where in China, Google Play is not that much big, so we can go for panel, something like that. So what about the user acquisition part in that sector? Have you ever tried that?
At least at LabCave, we purely focused on iOS and Google Play, targeting users for third-party stores. When we tried, we didn't get a return of investment, so it doesn't make any sense for us to invest money on something that doesn't return us any revenue whatsoever, or the return, but it's really low.
Okay.
But that's LabCave. I'm not sure. Maybe you guys.
You can talk. So I mean, if that's for China, then you have to work with like a local China big publisher, Tencent, something like that. And then Korea, then you can consider like one store. So this is another channel. But then for Sixway, because we mainly focus in English-speaking market and Japan, so we mainly rely on Apple and Google as well. Right.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the audience?
How about influencer marketing? Are you anybody using influencers to, and what's the ROI in different?
Yeah. You can go for it first.
Yeah. So we did use influence marketing from English-speaking market to Japan as well. So I would say it's not to look at how big the influencer is. Yeah, so although there may be chance that working with some big influencer might generate a lot of views, a lot of interaction with the player, but then you have to make sure that the audience is really related to your game. So this is the first thing. Like what we are doing in Japan is like we are publishing strategy game in Japan. So strategy game indeed is not really that popular in Japan. RPG game is more dominant in Japan. So when we pick the influencer, we need to look into the market and then find the right audience of user. So we cannot use really the big influencer which have a lot of RPG gamer. So they might not interest in our game. So at the end of the day, the conversion will be low, and then at the end, the return on investment will be low as well. So look into each influencer. When I work with the Japanese agency regarding the influencer, so they send me the list of the influencer. I look each of them and then look at the video they produce. So we know that at the end of the day, we know that which of the influencer will have the potential for us to grow. This is more important, I would say.
We actually work with a lot of influencers in Southeast Asia. We actually help clients to source, and we also partner with different KOL and influencer agencies across the Southeast Asia market. Some are really big, some are very specialized, some are very niche, because we don't just help them to pair them with gaming products. There's a lot of non-gaming clients who use influencers as well. And some influencers are really picky, especially if they think themselves as a brand, so they are very picky on the product that they match to. I.e., if you're beauty specialized in KOL, you wouldn't want to promote a game because the audience would be completely different in a way. So, very similar to what Billy was saying, they would, we would work with agencies that they will send us the list, and we'll try and go through the KOLs individually to see if they will match. Actually, most of the times we find, I think KOL is a really, the industry in KOL is very fragmented actually, and it's hard to track, very hard to track. How would you know if the views that they give you are correct, are not inflated? How would you know? I mean, there's tools available online, but what are those tools? Again, it's really hard to 100% say it's correct and accurate. And that's why most of the times when you try to negotiate with the KOLs and influencers, one, they don't really know how to do it properly. They're not a professional marketer. Some of them are really young and haven't done business before, and some of them are still students. So
I thought you were going to say something else.
Yeah. So no. There's a post a couple of weeks ago saying that an influencer with over 1 million followers and was selling clothes, I think, for the post, and turns out there was only 27 shipments, and the payment to the girl was way over $10,000. So it's obviously the return of investment was terrible. So some of the KOLs that we worked with are really good. Some of them, I must say, especially in particular in Southeast Asia, Philippines, for example, where I think we helped NetEase for that. And one in particular, they would go beyond the actual agreed scope. They actually made multiple videos. They were only asked to make one. They made multiple videos, and they even threw in the live streams. So it wasn't even asked for. So they added extra value. So we appreciate those, and I'm sure the client appreciated those. So those would become the top priority. KOLs will work again. Again, it's back to the relationship I mentioned earlier. It's if you try to track that, I mean, how can you track relationship? So yeah.
All right, we have 1 minute left, and I see another hand up there.
So it kind of relates to the influence question, but what about affiliate marketing? Like, do you see any possibility, any kind of good areas for affiliates to actually help with user acquisition in terms of, just getting into as an alternative channel to the paid marketing?
I can speak about that. So as I mentioned, we have like a small bucket for like the testing budget by like 10 to 15% of the targeting of the budget for this kind of a testing. So affiliate marketing is actually in these buckets. So why do we not like growing it bigger and bigger? It's actually like a lot of like concern from like the quality of the install, and also how do we handle the frauds, because like those of the tracking is actually in the dark. So we don't know where the traffic's coming from. Even like they tell us, so if some of the site ID of the neighbor, but we cannot trace like what they are users like coming from, or like which is the impression being delivered. So that part is actually like not giving us like good enough like the high level of the confidence by like keep investing that. And then sometimes like the volume is so small. So because like huge game and billionaire casino is actually a latecomer, we need a high volume of the install to catch up the market and tend to have a better market share. So for those of the affiliate, they can only give us like 2-digit to 3-digit install a day. So that actually is not good enough. So that's why we like put the bigger investment on those of the sustainable, like reliable, and then scalable like inventory like that we want to do.
So just a follow-up question to that. I mean, fraud is such a huge problem across like paid marketing. Like, are you seeing any changes, any ways to be able to solve this fraud issue? Is blockchain solutions, like, are they coming up? You know, there's a lot of talk about blockchain alternatives, but I haven't seen anything that has really fundamentally solved this problem. Curious to know.
You want to solve this problem. If it's an easy way to make money, fraudsters are going to be 2 steps ahead just making money out of it. So, or you embrace it, and you know the fact that if you expand your marketing strategy to beyond the walled gardens of Google or Facebook, and even then you can find questionable traffic incoming to your campaigns. That's the nature of the business. But the situation is for you to balance how much do you want your marketing team to invest their time fighting fraud versus how much is worth your time and your team resources to actually invest perhaps their time and money in something else that might have a better return of investment.
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you. I think we're out of time. I'm sure the panelists here are still around for a bit, so could follow up with further questions with them. Thank you very much.